18-month-year-old at home and one brewing. So I've been going to Pilates.
Good.
In a physical sense.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and actually finding time. I'm a very keen swimmer, so that's where I get my balance. I get in the pool and I don't have to talk to anyone. I don't have to listen to everyone. I just get to swim, and I really enjoy that. I'm not a very nice person if I don't get to go swimming. My department members will tell you that used to be the case. Haven't been for a swim for a while, Jules. Okay.
Yeah, good stuff. Well done, you.
Perfect. And that's us, 10:30. Kia ora, everyone. We'd like to introduce David Cournane, who's joining us from Wellington, HOD of Aotea College. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That is correct. And he's going to talk to us today about happiness and engagement and what it takes to just be a better version of ourselves for our students and the people that we work with, I think is a pretty quick way to sum up what we're going to talk about here. As you'll see, David's going to be screen sharing his presentation. So if you do have any questions, please continue to pop them up. He won't be able to see the chat, but I will be ready to interrupt him if needed. If not, we will direct those questions at the end of the session. So all yours, David. Go for it.
Awesome. Thanks heaps. So yeah, as mentioned there, my name is David Cournane. I'm newly in the role of Head of Faculty at Aotea College in Wellington, having previously worked at other secondary schools around this region here. And you'll learn a little bit more about me through the first portion of today's session, because today's really about the journey that I've been through from a version of a health and physical education teacher that potentially don't look back on as proudly as I probably could, into a version of that today that I'm much more happy and content with. What I'm going to be looking at is integrating some key ideas from positive education and positive psychology that I've sort of been open up to over the last few years, and the Balance is Better philosophy that is currently being promoted by Sport NZ. And in this session, we'll be looking at developing a positive approach within HPE departments and sports programs that places the needs and motivations of students first. Ideally, we'll be getting towards a place where I can sort of portray that things like happiness and engagement and a positive sense of self for young people are much more worthy measures of success for us as educators than academic and sporting results. And this has really come from a place in my teaching career where early doors, the leaders that I was sort of led by were wonderful people in their own right, but really it came down to the measurables. It came down to the quantitative academic and sporting results that they were pushing for their schools. Because positive education is a big part of what we're looking at, we're going to jump straight into a little bit of practice to warm things up here with one of the key tenets of positive psychology, which is gratitude. I'm hoping that people have got a phone or a device that they can fiddle around with pretty close at hand. I'm going to draw your attention over to www.menti.com, and a 6-digit code should be appearing on the screen in front of you right there, 804135, and hoping that all of you can sit back and reflect upon where your head is at right now and focus upon a number of things that you are currently feeling grateful for in your life. They can be tangibles or intangibles, but things that you feel are really that you are thankful for in the world around you at the moment. And what we're going to sort of reflect upon and see is these things from our colleagues around the country popping up onto the screen as we do this, as the things that we are feeling as we give up some of our holidays to professionally develop in this area. So hopefully a number of you are sort of finding your way across here, and in the next few moments we'll be able to sort of see and reflect upon the aspects of gratitude that some of us are feeling. We have our first sort of contribution right here, looking at what's been happening in the last hour or two. We're thankful for Auntie Jacinda, which is great. I'm sure many of us are across the country. The other key thing that we're going to be looking at and sort of looking to utilize our devices for, and I'll draw your attention to now at the moment, we'll pop back in and see people's gratitude reflections in the next couple of seconds. But we're also going to do another little experiment with our devices. And while our devices are in front of us here at the moment, what I want you to do is choose a person in your phone, and let's make it somebody who you don't necessarily keep in contact with on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, but you wished you did. Somebody that is in your phone is a contact from somewhere in your life that you wish you kept in contact with more often. And for that person, I want you to send them a text message of love or of care or of gratitude to let them know that you are thinking of them. And I'd love you to do that now. So whilst, people at the front of a classroom aren't necessarily telling you to get distracted by your device, that is exactly what I'd love you to be doing right now, and send that message off. If the person that you send it to sends you a response during this webinar, then I'd love you to sort of post, not necessarily exactly what that response was, but how that response made you feel. If it was a response sort of reflecting the love, the care, and the gratitude that you were sharing to them, how that may have made you feel as a person would be a wonderful thing to get back as we see that. And as we do that, we sort of flick back across here to just see the various things that people are grateful for. And coffee's coming in there probably almost as large and important as our individual health. A lot of people were feeling gratitude for their holidays, their jobs, their family, their time to breathe, having job security. For me, and somebody's even spelt my surname correctly, which is a wonderful surprise. So a whole bunch of different things that at this point in time we are feeling grateful for. I open my presentation with these things because ultimately gratitude is one of the key tenets of positive psychology, that ability to sort of reflect upon what right now is important to us. So I will pop back in later on that. Now, a little bit of a outlier with regards to my approach to this session. I'm not an expert in this area by any stretch of the imagination. I'm simply somebody who has had a lot of experience in teaching and in leading in education, and am passionate about doing things well, and giving things a go right here. So just a plea, I guess, out to the audience today and those that potentially watch the replay, sort of just a request for credit for trying here. A little bit of context to what I'm going to be talking about. This isn't me with the whistle in my gob, but it could well have been 19 years ago when I took on PE teaching. I trained at Otago from 97 to 2000, and then did teacher education here in Wellington in 2001. And in 2002, when I took on a role in education, these were the messages that I was being given, not directly, not verbatim, but a paraphrased version of what I was told it meant to be an effective PE teacher. Being in control with, how loud you can blow your whistle and how aggressive you can make yourself look. That the idea of not being sadistic enough to be a PE teacher were the messages that were being shared. In those early years of my education as well, I had a role in the higher end level of sport within schools. So a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about today may seem critical of elite level secondary school sport, and in a way it's meant to, but I do just want to draw your attention to the fact that I was directly involved in it for a chunk of time during my teaching. The young man flying through the air here was a member of a first 15 team that I coached back in the day. And at that time, he was a part of a group where secondary school sport first got thrown on primetime Sky Sport TV, and the whole model of semi-professional youth sport athletes was generated at this time. And I was in the midst of it and believing that it was a really positive thing. The key message that my educational leaders were giving at that time was the message of don't smile until Easter. The thought that we needed to be seen as, in order to be the person in charge in our classrooms, we needed to be the gruff, rough exterior in order to I guess, assert ourselves in that space. And then along came these young men, and these young men are my kids in my neighborhood. A picture taken during isolation earlier in 2020. Grayson as we look at it, in the yellow t-shirt, and Mateo in the green and the grey. And these young men is really where my change of perspective really started to generate. So Grayson's 10 years old. At the time that he was born, I was teaching at St. Patrick's College, Silverstream in Wellington. And Mateo on the right-hand side there is 7 years old. And he was born whilst I was still at Silverstream, but have since moved on and taught at a couple of other schools since then. And that perspective sort of came in line with this message from Brene Brown, for those that follow her work. And she states that we either own our stories, or they own us. Only when we have the courage to own our history are we able to write a brave new ending to our story. And I use that quote because this is really about the fact that if I hadn't owned my story, I could well still be doing the same things today and believing the same things today that I did 19 years ago. And I am very, very glad that I don't. Perspective has also come from my professional learnings across this time, and learning a little bit more about the work that Brene does around courage and vulnerability, looking into Martin Seligman, and a lot of today is going to be about positive psychology, attending the Positive Education New Zealand conference over the last couple of years down in Christ College, which has been rebranded as the Wellbeing and Education New Zealand conferences, and an amazing conference over in Australia 3 or 4 years ago that really opened my eyes to some of the work happening in schools around the world. So before we get underway with my insights with regards to positive psychology, we're going to return to Menti, different code coming up, and a different sort of format right here. And the question being asked of you once you get in here to www.menti.com and 688422 is in less than 15 words, the true purpose or value of quality HPE is. So what do you think the real value of us doing our jobs well is? What is the purpose? What is it that we are striving to achieve through the work that we are doing? We're going to sort of revisit our responses here later in the webinar, but I want to sort of capture them together now as we're going to sort of compare it to the true purpose and value of secondary school sport, and the goals that we wish to achieve out of both of those programs as we go as well. So, like I say, over the next 30 seconds to a couple of minutes, because it'll probably take a wee while to get these responses in, we're looking at this question, the true purpose or value of quality HPE. Now, early responses, quality people, positive relationships with physical activity, society, and our peers. Coming in, which is awesome, and absolutely two things that I endorse and agree with. We'll give it another minute or so to get a greater range of responses up here. And enjoyment, and absolutely when we look towards what we want, young people, but old people alike, to be getting out of life, enjoyment has got to be within there. We're pushing maybe the word boundary here, allowing students to experience positive health and PE physical experiences that stimulate a love of lifelong physical activity. It's almost stealing the words out of a later slide right out of my mouth. Good humans, creating well-rounded, creative, and indecent citizens who find joy, and I'm going to hope that maybe it was decent citizens, or maybe I'm reading it wrong, who find joy in movement, work well with others, take action, and know themselves. Skills to make healthy choices, and the list goes on. And as we look at these responses, and a number of things will sort of be done with this, we are going to compare it alongside of what we see as the true purpose and value of our sports programs within schools, but we're also going to share these responses as PDFs to those attending as well, just to sort of augment some of the discussion that we're going to be having as we go through here, and looking at some specific comments that individuals make. So empowering learners around their ability to move, to be healthy and happy citizens. So a lot of incredibly positive language, and the word positive popping up a bunch of different times within people's responses as well, which is wonderful. For those that are still busy writing, feel free to please finish off your contribution and share it in there as well. But I'm going to head back here and start looking at my journey with positive psychology and education. It's really come from a guy like Carl himself, or at least the sort of quote here from Carl on his augmented learning platform. My journey with positive psychology and education has come from a direct need to keep learning and keep challenging myself. I've loved every school that I've worked in my time. I'm in my 4th secondary school at the moment. But I have made conscious decisions to move on when I have felt like the learning and the challenge hasn't necessarily existed or been available within that space, and taking on other roles within other schools and looking at new elements of professional development because of that need to keep learning and keep challenging. So that has led me to positive psychology, and positive psychology is massive. It's a huge branch of the psychology field going on at the moment, and positive education stems directly from that. I'm not going to unpack the entire area of psychology, but rather I'm going to focus in upon these 4 key ideas that have rung true for me along this process. The first of them being deliberate positive connections, selective attention, appreciative inquiry, and a focus upon character strengths. And all of those will sort of lead me to a little bit of a case study, which I'm going to look at, which I'm calling end of termitis. So firstly, when we think about deliberate positive connections, I found myself in different places and in different contexts, getting a sense of frustration in being surrounded by people that didn't necessarily build others up around them, but rather because of their pessimistic approach to things that were going on, tended to bring the sort of energy or the vibe of a room down. So I got to a point where this frustration with people who were more willing and prepared to drag others around them down rather than build them up made me realize that there must be another way. And this quote right here: a key to growing as an educator is to keep company mainly with teachers who uplift you, whose presence inspires you, and whose dedication drives you, was a key sort of motivator for me to switch away from people that were always in the zone of criticism and move towards those, be drawn towards those that were ideas people, that were creative, that were uplifting, that wanted to add value to the context that they existed within. So I'm sure we've all had those moments in our teaching careers where, whether it be in staff rooms or in staff meetings, those elements of our professional bodies where they are quicker to criticize than to solve or to suggest ideas or to be a part of the solution. And for me, it was about moving in that other direction. So I moved to a quote here from the great coach John Wooden, who says, "Don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can do." What I mean by that, or what John meant by that, really was that when people focus upon all of the things that they're not directly in control of or don't have direct influence over, they lose a focus upon the things that they actually can control and they can influence, and the things that they can make a difference with regards to. And in this quote, and there's plenty of other stuff from John Wooden that I'm incredibly impressed by, led to a conscious decision, like I've mentioned already, to surround myself with teachers prepared to grow, with a greater capacity to uplift rather than to tear down. Which leads me to the second key part of positive psychology that I focused upon, and we'll talk to you about here this morning. And this Venn diagram, I think that's called a Venn diagram, articulates what I mean by selective attention. In our careers, in our lives, we get faced with a whole bunch of stuff that for various reasons can be deemed as important, that matters. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we can control. But it's really only for some things that both of those cross over. And what I, in positive psychology, would like to say is that we are better served by focusing our attention upon what both matters and is within our control. As soon as we spend our mental energy, our finite mental energy, on things that are outside of our control, or on things equally that don't matter, then that's energy that we can never get back. It's represented here also by the circles of control, and what I sort of have tended to focus my attention on since learning about these models is 80% of my energy going into the circle of control, being on those things that matter, that are directly within my sort of realm of, and not control in the sense of like a power dominance thing or anything like that, but things that I can have direct responsibility for. And 20% of that energy going into the circle of influence. So where I can not necessarily completely control that situation, but I do have an influence over it, and blocking out those things that I don't have any say or any influence over whatsoever. The outside circle here, the circle of concern. Yeah, maybe it's of concern, but if we can't do anything about it, then is it worth our time and our energy and our frustration to actually spend on unpacking it mentally with ourselves? The third key area of positive psychology that I do just want to briefly talk about at the moment is what's called appreciative inquiry. And I'm sure this isn't brand new to people here, but it was brand new to me about 3 years ago, sitting in an auditorium at Christ College when it was first spoken of at the Positive Education New Zealand conference. Appreciative inquiry is a way of, I guess, refocusing an old school SWOT model, with half of that SWOT model being the focus and the other half not being discarded as such, but certainly not taking all of our attention. For me, appreciative inquiry is a focus upon strengths and opportunities, not upon weaknesses and threats. We would be naive if we ignored weaknesses and threats. But appreciative inquiry and positive psychology says that we can grow so much more and in such a better direction if we focus upon the strengths and the opportunities. So the 3 Ds out of this 5D cycle that I'll just unpack a little bit further are the discover, the dream, and the design. At the start of this year, in a new school with a relatively new department being formed, 50% of us were new into the school within the last 12 months. I spent a bit of time one-on-one with each member of that department and asked them basically 3 questions. This department in this school, or your most recent department in your most recent school, what was it like on its best day? So this is the discover element right here. And we're looking for the current reality on its best day, the best version of what we currently have. And getting a sense of the things that people were most proud of that already existed within their context. The second question then asked them to dream, and it asked, blue sky thinking, if all of the barriers were taken away, what could this department look like 6 months, 12 months, 24 months from now? If like we say, those threats or those weaknesses could be mitigated, could be eliminated in some sense, what can we become as a team? And then the third D that was really relevant at that point in time was the design. And it's kind of the bridge between the discover and the dream. This is what we have already. This is what we're capable of already. This is what we could become. The design is how do we get there? And from that sort of sense, some incredibly positive conversations happened within our environment right there. So in terms of reviewing department practice, in terms of gathering student voice at the end of a course or partway through a course, in terms of school-wide approaches to developments in terms of curriculum or programs or processes or anything like that, in terms of curriculum leader level, this appreciative inquiry process for mine is really powerful. It reflects our teacher inquiry model, obviously, and circular in nature, and we're trialing and we're gathering voice and we're reviewing and we're heading back to the start of it and we're redefining what that inquiry actually is. So it's nothing brand new to us, but what I would suggest is that the brand new component of it is that almost in its entirety, the focus is in a positive direction, appreciating what we have and what we can become. The fourth tenet of positive psychology that really stood out for me and that I've brought into my sort of practice in a range of different ways is the VIA character strengths model. Being able to look at ourselves internally, being able to look at our colleagues and others around us, as students, the families of our students, being able to look at them and recognize the strengths that each individual on this planet and in our schools has, rather than identifying weaknesses or flaws or anything like that. So what we see in front of us is a visual representation of the VIA Institute's character strengths model. What I've shared via the handout, I believe, or Carl did on my behalf earlier doors, is a link to the VIA character strengths website. And at that website, you can take an online survey, which will actually identify which of these things are your strengths. But what I'd love you to do over the next few minutes, and I'll sort of lead you through this process, is answer each of these questions. Feel free to use the chat if you want to, but also just feel free to think about them for yourself. The first question that I've got for you is, which of these traits do you see as a strength for you personally and professionally? So which of these words stand out for you as things about yourself that you are most proud of? things that you believe have led you to the place in this world that you are at the moment. As you do that, I'd like you to think and try and identify potentially sort of 3 to 5 different character strengths that you see as the most powerful for you as a person, both personally and professionally. The key thing about this model is that doesn't mean that the rest of these things are weaknesses. We all have these things to varying degrees, and we can all develop these things to varying degrees. But some of them are simply stronger and bigger assets for us than others. So when I look at something like this, I've already, I guess, started this presentation with an exercise in gratitude. So clearly that stands out for me as one of the key things that's important for me. I do feel brave in a number of ways sitting here at the moment, not knowing how many people are actually listening or watching. Is for me is a sense of bravery that I'm feeling at the moment. And I'd talk at the moment, and it hasn't necessarily always been a strength, but a love of learning is really powerful as well. Now I want you to shift your focus outwards, and rather than thinking about yourself as an individual, I want you to think about your colleagues within your health and physical education departments or your wider staff at the school. Maybe think of 1 or 2 individuals and think about what are the things that stand out about those people as their strengths. What are the things that make them the educational leader, the educational professional that they are today out of this framework? Is it that they are creative, that they're constantly coming up with new ideas, new things to the table? Is it that they know and understand people, they are socially intelligent? Are they deeply spiritual in nature? Apologies. Is it their humor that adds real value to the department meeting on a Monday afternoon when nobody really wants to be there? What are the things that about those around you in your professional life that are real strengths? The third question that I want you to think about in relation to this framework, and again, feel free to mention these things into the chat, but also feel free to just think about them yourselves, is I want you to think about a student that you have struggled with for any reason in recent years. Maybe it's been a 2020 thing. Maybe they were really difficult to reach during isolation. Maybe it's something a little bit more historic than that, 2 or 3 years ago from now. Somebody, though, that hasn't necessarily been the easiest student to motivate or to engage or to bring in line with your expectations for your spaces. And think about which of these things, rather than the things about that person, that individual student that held them back from success, which of these things on this character strengths framework were actually strengths for that individual? What was it that they were demonstrating or being able to do that was actually a strength in their behavior rather than an obstacle? Why I asked this question is because a couple of weeks before the holidays, I was sitting in a neurodiversity workshop held at our school for relatively new teachers at RTA College. And in this neurodiversity workshop, the woman presenting it from Kapiti College spoke about an experience that they'd had with a neurodiverse student who, for whatever reason, found themselves on the roof of a school building yelling obscenities at students and staff and passers-by alike. And at that point in time, a bunch of traditional steps that you'd think of schools doing in order to deal with the health and safety of that individual and those around them sort of started ricocheting around in people's brains and ideas. But what one staff member chose to do was to applaud this young person for their bravery and for their social intelligence, because what it ended up being was that the person was on the roof because they felt like one of their closest friends was hard done by in a class earlier that day. And the behavior was not acknowledged as being the dangerous act of defiance that it probably clearly was, but rather an act of bravery, an act of social intelligence, where they were looking to support and acknowledge the feelings and emotions of a friend that they were dealing with. And what happened on the back of that is that the young person was brought down relatively calmly off the roof in a number of minutes. So as you do, why I tell that story, I guess, is because as you do sort of deal with students that may be a little bit tougher to deal with than others, it's always a wonderful and a powerful thing to actually think about their strengths, the opportunities that come with those strengths, the ways that we can deal with them, not to use language that I used earlier doors, not to break them down, but rather to build them up and fill them with a sense of love. So this character strength model in a whole range of different ways has really resonated with me in recent times. Just conscious of time slipping by, so I'll slide past that and get into the second half, the middle part of this presentation. I talked earlier doors about this term of end of termitis, and this is linked very much to positive psychology for me, but it's something that's really resonated with me, especially in recent weeks. But what I realize is that it's stuff that I've heard for the last 19 years. These memes right here, looking at the monkey in the tree saying, "Thank goodness it's Friday, I've had enough of this week," is something that I hear on a weekly basis from colleagues. The owls on the left-hand side, and what happens to us throughout the duration of a school year. This concept of end of termitis, and what I'd like to put to the listeners today is that this is something that I don't think that we should have to accept any longer, and positive psychology would tell us that it shouldn't. We shouldn't accept this. Why do we feel like at the end of the week we should feel like crap, or at the end of the year we should feel so haggard, like our owl friend on the left-hand side here? For me, it is no longer acceptable that, for me personally, for those that I work with, it's no longer acceptable to actually feel like this is the norm. And I believe that a focus upon character strengths, a focus upon selective attention in terms of focusing upon what matters, and what we can control, in terms of surrounding ourselves with positive people, can help us to look like the owl on the left at the end of the year, as well as at the beginning of the school year. And one of the biggest things for me moving forward personally is going to be a focus upon wearing my graduation cap and spectacles with pride at the end of the year, rather than allowing myself to feel like the owl on the right. The old cliche of not being able to pour from an empty cup is really where this is coming from. And John Hattie tells us that when teachers become burned out or worn out, their students' achievement outcomes are likely to suffer because they are more concerned with their personal survival. The language of positive psychology talks about not just surviving, but thriving. And if we are simply surviving our existence as teachers, then we ourselves and those that we're educating don't have the ability to thrive, let alone to flourish. The final sort of quote that I will utilize in regards to that comes from the wonderful deputy head girl from Aotea College in 2020, and she did clear it with me that I was allowed to use her quote. She spoke in our school assembly a couple of weeks before the holidays and used the quote of "I am influence." And this was not her as a deputy head girl, or it wasn't directed specifically to the teachers. It was directed to each and every person seated in the assembly on this day, and everybody outside of the assembly on that day as well. And what she meant was that regardless of who we are, or regardless of whether we want it, what we do and how we act influences other people around us. And in this sense, if we are the haggard owl just surviving at the front of our classroom, then the influence, or at the front of our gym, then the influence that we have upon those around us is that they accept that to be the norm. They accept that it's normal for us as adults, and therefore for them as young people, to feel that way. So we have this responsibility to role model positive work habits and positive mindsets to our students. Sorry, and I've just got my 7-year-old just asking a quick question in there, but he's disappeared now. So the model that I sort of work towards, and I would like to urge people to think about here, and I'm sure this matrix has been shown to you in a range of different ways previously, But I've made one sort of addition to it, which for me has helped me immensely in my professional work. And it's come from this journey with positive psychology. And the key thing for mine is that when we leave things until they are urgent, those important things until they are urgent, whether it be reporting or marking or whatever, what comes with that is stress and anxiety and all of those sort of negative mental health connotations. When we shift our focus into the not urgent but important category, we shift our do across here. So the important things before they become urgent, immediately all of those negative mental health things associated with negative mental health are eliminated, taken away straight away. So what I'm talking about here, the previous version of me would have got, a level 3 sociology PE set of assessments on a Friday. And I would have said, okay, well, I'm not going to do it this weekend. And I'll get to next week. And it's like, okay, I'll just put that off. And maybe I'll start it next weekend and put it off. And then all of a sudden the kid asks, have we marked those assessments yet? And I would have rushed around because I'd feel a sense of guilt and a sense of shame having not got onto it earlier. Rushed through it as quickly as possible in a stressed and anxious sort of way. Where practice has shifted now, where rather than getting that set of work on a Friday when I probably don't stand a chance of going anywhere near it, I'll get it on a Monday. And my key decision that I make is that 30% of it, a third of it, is done before I go to sleep that night. It's not urgent yet. They've only just submitted it, but it's important, and it's massively important. And the job has begun, and it makes me personally just feel so much better about being underway with that. Obviously, the not important and the not urgent stuff, we want to just delete. We want to step away from it altogether. And I've got struggles at the moment stepping away with various sorts of elements on social media and the like. And then delegate in that area where it may be urgent, but it's not as important. The importance of operating in departments that are networks rather than hierarchies is really important there. Now, I am really conscious of time, so I'm going to probably jump through one more of our interactive things and move straight on to the second half of this presentation, which I want to draw a connection to our work in health and PE departments with before we finish up. I was lucky enough in 2018 at the school that I was working at the time to be the school lead on a Sport NZ Balance is Better pilot project, which is encapsulated by this quote here from Jackie, a school sport coordinator. Jackie says, kids play for different reasons. Some play to get better, some play for their friends, and some play for the watermelon at half time. To keep them in the game, we need to understand why they want to play, and no matter the response, support them unconditionally to become the best person they can be through their sporting experiences. This led to involvement directly with this project, where we were looking to unpack some of the myths, some of the negative attitudes and behaviours that had started to creep into the school sports environment that, in a way, I'd been a part of 10 to 15 years ago, when I got super excited when my first 15 got themselves 4 games on TV on the first year of televised college rugby. What that actually led to was this hyper-professionalisation of school sports programs that has only created harm, not benefit, for the majority of young people involved in school sport. You'll hopefully be aware of this campaign, and this is where I'll start to draw my connection back to our health and PE programs. The Balance is Better Keep Up with the Play campaign, which launched earlier in 2020, is designed to sort of illustrate the fact that young people are being lost to sport because of their experiences. Their experiences are not meeting their needs, are not meeting their motivations. Generation Z, or whatever they've become beyond that, are being led in a number of different ways, as our generation was, and it's just not meeting their needs. So this football team's team photo is half empty because it's illustrating the fact that a certain percentage are being lost to the game. And even those that are there are not necessarily having the joyful experiences that they maybe wanted to when they went there. I link this to what potentially is happening for young people with regards to health and physical education in their lives as well. When the experiences and the learnings that they're getting within our programs do not actually meet their needs or their motivations, then they are potentially lost to us in the senior version of our subject, which is potentially a negative in its own right. But the bigger thing is that they are lost to healthy and physically active lifestyles into the future. And if we go back to, and I'll very quickly go to it here, if we go back to the true purpose and value of quality HPE, so many of you talked about the learning experiences and about the lifelong learning, the involvement and the love for physical activity. So this comment right here from somebody who's watching this at the moment said, allowing students to experience positive health and PE physical experiences that stimulate a love of lifelong physical activity. And hopefully we are all confidently and proudly sitting here believing that's what we are doing. And I don't doubt that for a moment. But what we do know is that a percentage of the New Zealand population is not leading a healthy and a physically active lifestyle. Where we sit on the obesity charts is way higher than it should be. As sedentary lifestyles are certainly on the increase. And we and those that lead sport within our schools have some of the responsibility for generating that lifelong love of sport and physical activity and healthy lifestyles in order to keep these people in sport, but also in order to keep people involved in healthy and physically active lifestyles. So the campaign addresses 5 key behaviors or attitudes myths that are affecting youth sport. And those myths are in the brackets as we go through this. And in bold alongside of them are the flip side of the coin, is the actual message from Sport NZ and what I'd like to articulate here and connect to our health and physical education programs. So the first one is early specialization is good for development. No, it's not. The minority of those that exist in sports for a long time and have success in that, the minority are those that specialized early. The majority are those that were involved in multiple sports and developed a variety of skills to build their overall development. The second myth is that early success leads to adult success. What we need to know and understand, and I'm sure we all do, is that young people develop at different ages and stages. The third key issue is that applying an adult sporting paradigm to developing youth participants simply does not work. We need to understand how youth learn and how youth play by applying a participant-centric approach. 4, if you're not in the top team, there is no point continuing, is the myth. The flip side of that is that involvement in sport at any level or any stage in life is better for our overall well-being. As an element, as a possible way of being physically active into our outer years, it is massively important. And the fifth one is the harder and the more often you train, the better you are. Again, a fallacy. Overtraining and overplaying, especially for youth athletes, can lead to injury and burnout in young players. So I just want to very quickly, before we, I guess, sort of shift to any sort of question and answer session, is just unpack each of those just a little bit further and then conclude what I have to say here this morning. Firstly, the first one there, the multiple sports, physical activities, and a variety of skills are good for development. What we see here on the left and the right are 2 examples of some of the longest serving, greatest athletes of our time, in Roger Federer and Tom Brady. And both of these guys were multi-sport athletes right up until their late secondary years. So we're talking about 17, 18, 19, involved in a whole range of various things. And they are actually more the norm than the Tiger Woods model, than the flip side of that. When we think about this in relation to our health and physical education programs, we're talking about the greater diversity in our programs, the better. And I absolutely know and endorse that sport is only potentially one small part of what we do. What I'd like to suggest is that as schools, we want to promote multi-sports participation, and as departments, we want to provide our young people with as many different physical activity opportunities and skill development opportunities and learnings and understandings about those movements in, through, and about movement as we possibly can. The greater the diversity, the better. Secondly, young people develop at different ages and stages. The diagram in the middle here sort of articulates what people think in terms of development, that it's this linear sort of straight line that we all follow along, where in reality, our pathway towards development is incredibly muddled with all sorts of setbacks and hurdles and changes of focus and things that happen in our life. Shit happens and we deal with it in a whole range of different ways. And ultimately, the top of the arrow can often end up higher than the linear pathway. And a couple of examples on here, Tyler Nathan Wong on the left and Ben Smith on the right, examples of really late developers with regards to the sports that they are now and have been excelling within. The third comment there with regards to balance is better was in understanding how youth learn and play by applying a participant-centric approach. Simply put, the more that we can put the learner at the center of our context, the better. So involving them in collaborative leadership within our space, getting them to reflect upon their experiences, putting them as a part of our inquiry model. The more that we can give our students agency, the better we are meeting their needs and their motivations. Fourth, involvement in sport and physical activity at any level or stage in life is better for well-being. For us, and again, you alluded to it in your response to the mentee earlier, Doors, retention is key. We need to hold people in sport. We need to hold people in physical activity. We need to hold people in meaningful, healthy, active lifestyles and healthy habits for as long as possible. The longer that we can have those that graduate from our schools and our courses being physically active, being involved potentially in sport or in other needs and wants, then that is a better outcome for our programs than a whole bunch of scholarship results or a team that won a national title at school or anything like that. Success for us is the big picture, but that is so much harder to measure. And finally, overtraining and overplaying can lead to injury and burnout in young players. A positive sense of self as a learner and as an athlete is a key to resilience and longevity in learning and in physical activity. I was lucky enough to sit in on a seminar by Nathan McCarty-Wallace about 12 months ago, and he talked about basically the key factor for a young person in terms of their learning and in terms of their resilience is their sense of self as a learner. If they are told or begin to believe that they are not worthy or valid as a learner, they will start to intrinsically believe that themselves, and that is going to be incredibly damaging for their long-term learning and for their resilience as a person moving forward as well. So we have this responsibility, both within sport and within health and physical education, to build that positive sense of self. So to summarize, and I think I've just gone over by a few minutes, but I'll quickly wrap this up. If we're to draw this back into the key to what I guess I want to get across is consistent messaging across all stakeholders in schools to ensure that happiness, that engagement, that a positive sense of self come first before any structural requirement to increase scholarship results or get more endorsements or bump up our pass rates. The psychological things imposed upon young people by adults, this need for competition or comparison across schools, within schools, has led to a win-at-all-cost mentality that has led to poaching and the haves and the have-nots mentality. Happiness, engagement, and a positive sense of self are much more worthy measures of our success than any of those other things. Whilst I absolutely understand the need to differentiate ourselves from sports departments as health and physical education departments, I do not think we need to distance ourselves, especially not philosophically. We ultimately are looking to achieve the same things, or should be looking to achieve the same things, and philosophically we need to get alongside of each other. So my apologies, I've sort of rushed through this second part of that because time got away on me a little bit. Hopefully any questions can come up now via our hosts. Is that the way that this is going to work? Juliet, Heather, there we go.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
I can.
Oh, fabulous. We're just having a few technical issues here at Tech Central in the middle of Christchurch, and we dropped out for a little bit.
Okay.
We're very pleased to see that you were still talking when we managed to reconnect after a couple of seconds, so that was fantastic. What a powerful presentation, a couple of really poignant topics there. I felt like you could have almost done 2 separate presentations there. I'm a huge fan of the character strengths BIA stuff. I've done that with my department before and I really rate it, and I've done it with a number of my students as well. And I was just talking with Heather yesterday about that whole, the balance thing, you know, in departments we give 100% in our classes and in our department situations, and it's really nice, and that's what is exciting about being in those spaces, but it's really hard to then take some of that and take it back home with you so that you're giving 100% in all of your life. So I really relate to that aspect of your presentation. I think that's really key, and we've just got a bit of balance going on here. We can't really see it very well with the bird, but we're just practicing some balance in our webinar background here as we go.
I would just love to acknowledge, now that I'm looking at the chat, wonderful comment from Tony there. Sends a bit of a shiver up my spine, actually. That's, yeah, wonderful and gracious words, Tony. Thank you.
Absolutely. You've had some great involvement from people around your character strengths as you've gone through the whole session here. So if you do have a chance to go through and have a look at that chat,
awesome.
It's really cool.
Awesome. Just reading Scott's. I'm trying to work out whether I know Scott Leggett, actually. It's a name that I remember. How have you incorporated the VIA stuff into your teaching and learning programs in the past? So we've utilised that in my last 2 schools at the junior health end of things, and we had all of our junior students actually completing the VIA character strengths self-assessment. And what comes on the back of that is they sort of get a group of 5 of those character strengths to focus their attention upon. We really draw their attention to the fact that doesn't discard the other 19, but try and get them to focus upon the things that the survey is already telling them are real strengths of themselves. And Scott Legg is sitting at my old desk. Okay. Oh, wonderful. And we look to then what comes on the back of it from VIA is a number of sort of suggestions and strategies that they can utilize to actually build those strengths even further. So actually had students, young men at Wellington College a couple of years ago, actually putting together plans for, you know, a week long or a month long or a term long plan of specific things that they can do to develop their individual strengths that little bit further. Probably the most powerful thing that we've done with them as individuals, though, was actually a greater sense of awareness of our colleagues at a departmental level. So early doors in 2020 in a building department at RTA College, I'd pre a department meeting had everybody complete the survey, but then keep their results to themselves. We had a resource that we sort of deal with that is all of those character strengths on little cards and had them spread across the table. And for a department member, let's say Mark is an example, the 6 of us that work with Mark tried to articulate what we saw as his greatest strengths before he actually opened up to us about what were his biggest strengths as well. And it was that sense of getting to know each other and value each other for what we brought to the table. And that as an exercise was incredibly powerful. And I see us sort of doing it in a range of different ways as we build as a team further in the coming terms and years as well.
Awesome.
Lots of people commenting that they've enjoyed the session, and I think engaged in, you know, both aspects of what you were saying and how they complemented each other as well. Dave, it's been fabulous, and I think it's another aspect of this conference that we'll have some take homes from, and considerations of what we might want to do with this when it comes to our teaching or our work within departments, and even just our approach to how we see our role as keeping our young people involved and being physically active, and what we do to support them in that way. Yeah, it's been fabulous. It's been really, really a privilege again to be involved and engage in that. So thank you on behalf of the 2 of us and everyone at Pent. It's been great, and we imagine that you might want to just go take a drink and see what your 7-year-old wanted when he came into the room before. He's done well to be able to hold back for those minutes and enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thanks for giving up your time, David.
Thank you, Juliet. Thanks, Heather. And thanks for everyone else.
See you later.
Bye bye.